Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. This is Alona's podcast with Step Up, and today's note to self is tips on forming healthy romantic relationships. And we are recording this during October, and we were reminded that October is actually domestic violence awareness month, and so we brought Erin in as a guest speaker. Erin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you all for having me. So, my name is Erin Osana Barba. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a part time mental health counselor here at Aloni and also clinical supervisor, and I work with our ambassadors. I've also previously worked with domestic violence clients in both shelter, also in community outreach, and also in the court system, and I did that for about 20 years. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing. And so I would like to open up today's podcast with by talking about my favorite book ever, and I talk about this book all the time. I can never stop talking about it, and it's bad. But so the book is Never Let Me Go, and it's by Kazuo Ishiguro, and it's a 2005 science fiction novel, and it takes place in a dystopian version of the late 1990s in England. And the lives of ordinary citizens are prolonged through a state sanctioned program of human cloning. The clones, referred to as students, grow up in a special institution, and we actually follow three clones, and most of the book focuses on them, and they are childhood friends, and they are named Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy. So in the middle of the book, Ruth and Tommy begins to date in their teenage years, and there's this snippet of the book where Katie notices that Ruth begins to copy the older couples that live there and their gestures in a romantic relationship, and Kathy also notices that the couples just copy romantic gestures they see from television shows, which I found incredibly interesting because a lot of our adolescents' romantic relationships, I believe, are really adapted from what we see in the media, as well as what we see from our parents, as well as just older couples that we see in school or anything like that. So that could really cause a problem with just romanticizing relationships, and the media really does not show relationships in the most perfect view at times. And yeah, would you guys like to jump in on that?
I agree definitely. Like I remember when I was little, like watching the Disney Channel movies or Nickelodeon, and then seeing like the couple, like the coming of age kind of high school romance, and then once you get into high school, you realize that it's not really like that. It's not like High School Musical or Camp Rock or anything like that. So it kind of morphs your perception of how your process should go in school, and also what signs you should be looking for when and if you want to get into a relationship.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
I agree. I think that social media creates a narrative for how relationships should look. Like, if I'm not getting, like, the 45,000 bouquet of roses, like, this is not worth it. And that definitely trickles into our relationships because we may feel that our partner is not doing enough or that we're not doing enough because we're not doing what society and social media shows is enough.
Right, it gives a really skewed image of how romantic relationships should be, and adolescent relationships are even harder because most of us don't know what we're doing in life, so having to direct how we feel and how we act with another person is really hard, I feel like, and the media really does not help.
And it also harms like expectations too.
Right, the
There's like too many
expectations are
harsh
so skewed.
expectations. Yeah.
Right, because all forms of social media is not a accurate view of how people should even act in life. But yeah, Erin, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that.
I love
I
it.
think actually both Donna and Clara were what you both were saying. I resonated with a lot. First, starting with you, Donna, because when we're kids, that's all we learn from, right? Is the people around us, whether that's our parents, if we have parents, or our guardians, family. We learn by that, and we learn through observation. That's how young ones learn. And then when we get into traditional college age, right? So before age 25, our brain isn't totally developed, right? And so we're learning, or we have in our mind already what we've learned from what we've observed, And then you have all the fantasies with Disney, and I was thinking the same thing, you know, Beauty and the Beast and, you know, Cinderella, and it's just like all of this romanticized, you know, the woman's going to be rescued by the man. Well, what about female relationships or gay, you know, relationships, or what about those ones where the woman isn't rescued and, you know, swept off her feet by the man? And so I think there's just all of this skewed information. And I think, too, to your point, Clara, that when we get to that point, we start comparing ourselves to other people. I mean, you're all in the time of your life where, you know, 18 to 25, your brain's not developed. And so you've shifted from observing from your family, because that's no longer your priority. It becomes your friends and other people your age. And social media absolutely impacts that, because then you see what other people want to project, which we all know on social media is usually just the positive. And so then you think it's so wonderful, and you second guess yourself because you're still developing that sense of self. So yeah, I have a lot to say about that, obviously,
awesome.
but I agree with what you're all saying.
Right.
Yeah.
You completely said like what I was thinking into words, which is lovely. Would you have anything to say about that?
And I agree with Clara, because as we are young people and using the social media, people become compared to others and have high expectation that also affect on the healthy relationship. So yeah.
Right. And one thing I kind of find with the problem with the media and how they project romantic relationships, it really causes a lot of young people to have the desire to really jump into a relationship, especially those who, let's say, have not experienced a relationship yet. I find a lot of young people just really want to be in a relationship for not the right reasons, I would say. Like, you know, the right reasons is just because you connected with the person. They kind of want the image of like what a relationship will give them, and that causes a whole different like gateway of problems to open up, because if that is your one reason to get into a relationship, I feel like a lot of your boundaries and your expectations and just like your, what's that word, when you like have a set, your expectations to just completely be banished, you know, like you will
Like the bare minimum type?
right, you will like be like, oh, that's the bare minimum, I like that, and that's not good. You know. Yeah.
And you settle. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
you
Yeah.
settle.
Yeah,
Right,
you
that's
settle.
exactly what I was thinking.
Yes.
And I think that is a huge problem as well.
Yeah, I think the idea of being single is not really accepted in society, especially when you're young. It's like, oh, you've never had a boyfriend, you've never had a girlfriend before. Like, you're weird. Like, what's wrong with you?
I know.
So it's just like there's a lot of this like weight on your shoulders of like, oh, I need to get with someone, I need to find someone, because then like that's what's expected of me in this age, in this time of my life.
Right. Like a lot of, I feel like even American culture is kind of dictated on that partnership. Like when we think about a lot of high school like events or anything like that, like let's say prom, half of the event is going with a prom date, you know, and there's not an emphasis on friendship as much in like that American culture of just being young, you
So
know.
like the prom king, prom queen thing.
Yes,
yeah.
right. Yeah, do you guys have anything to say about that?
And I want to share one thing, like since Dana shared, like being not accepted because we are single. Yeah, that's funny. Like in Asia, like in Asian countries, most of the Asian parents, they really proud when their children are like not having not in a relationship. Like they really proud. But being in the Western countries like United States, being single is not like accepted. You're weird. Why you don't have a boyfriend?
Yeah.
I think it's worse for women too. Like for men, it's like, oh, he's the bachelor, but for women, she's like, oh, she's a cat lady. Like
Exactly. No, that's so true, Donna. I mean, I didn't get married until I was, I think, 36. And so I was single and professional for a very long time. And I used to get those comments all the time. I met my husband when I was 33, but it was like, why are you single? Why are you single? And then they start to categorize women, especially if you get too old, like something's wrong with you. And no, I was being selective, you know? Like I knew what I wanted, I knew what I deserved. And
you have
so,
standards.
yeah, exactly. I didn't
That's
go down
also
a
what I was thinking.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. Like
Good
we
point,
talk
Pooh.
about
Yeah.
how there's like, I really like that you brought that up, that men don't really have a bad label when they are single and they are older. They're just called a bachelor.
Yeah.
But, you know, women, if they're older and single, they're spindler age.
Spinsters, yeah.
You're spinster, or you're
Yeah.
a cougar, or you're a, you know, all of this, all
Yeah.
of these negative
You're a
connotations.
crazy cat
yeah.
lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. But yeah, the media can be, you know, I always...
Cruel.
Yeah, it can be cruel. I always try to defend the media because I think there are some parts of it where it's really great, and the, you know, message behind why social media was created was just to connect people, but at the same time it has created a really, you know, kind of toxic cycle, especially for relationships. Yeah,
I always think of it like a double-edged sword.
right,
Because there's
right.
good things about it, but it's bad things about it. It's just like a balance.
Yeah. Can you guys like list out just some other things you would say the media kind of harms in relationships? For me, I would really think it's like the expectations. I'm gonna talk about like a TikTok I just saw where this woman, she like, I'm pretty sure it's fake, but she like went to a really expensive restaurant. She ordered 48 oysters, and then her date left because he was like, I'm not paying. He's like, I'm not paying for 48 oysters. It's so...
People commenting like 48 oysters, and I'm like, what is that? Now I know.
And then, yeah, it's
Like
just
the whole like who pays for the date idea.
right. It just sets a lot of different expectations on relationships that I don't think need to always be set. But yeah, do you guys have any other like examples of how the media kind of just skews romantic relationships?
Well, I think by putting those things out there all the time, like an expensive restaurant, or I mean, what about the day to day, right? We still have to clean a bathroom at home. We still have to, like when you live with somebody, like there's so many like normal things day to day that we don't talk about. It's more about these exciting, wonderful things, is what you see on social media, right? Or even in movies, even in TV. That you're either seeing the really extreme negative and the really bad fighting, or you're seeing really amazingly positive. But what about just normal life? That
Right.
how do you go about supporting each other through life and the ups and downs of
Right.
life? And unfortunately, that's where I think it gets skewed.
Right. I think that's wonderful, and that just brought an idea to my head that not a lot of young relationships know how to handle arguments or boundaries when it comes to like having those bad days. Because, you know, in my experience of what I've seen through like just, you know, my peers or anything like that, when they have like a tiny argument, oh, it's time to break up. You know, it's like one argument, it's time to break up. Maybe it's not that big of a deal in the long run, but that's just how they were kind of taught to handle that situation. Like, you know, a relationship is not supposed to have any bad days. You know, it's always supposed to be perfect. The honeymoon is supposed to last 50 years. It's never ending, you know, things like that. And I think that's really hard, and no one really teaches a person to like how to handle a bad day with your partner, or how to handle having an argument with your partner and setting those boundaries and not allowing your partner to, you know, cross those boundaries, or just how to have an argument with a partner in a healthy way. Because I think arguments are, in a healthy way, they can really help you grow in a partnership, but I don't think a lot of adolescents really know how to argue. That sounds bad, but you
Like
know.
how to have conflicts, like conflicting
Right.
ideas. Because I think a lot of times there are different expectations between people, and they don't see eye to eye in what they want out of that relationship. You know, so that's, I think, where a lot of the root of the problem comes from, is that maybe someone just wants like a right now thing, whereas other people are looking towards the future.
Right, and it can cause a lot more conflict if you just don't know how to have a conflict with someone in a healthy way, and it just goes into a toxic cycle of saying like really horrible things when you don't need to, and that could be a factor on why, you know, media also portrays relationships in a really weird light, because it's always positive or super negative, and there's no middle ground of, so what do I do when me and my partner argue and I just don't know really how to communicate in a, you know,
Healthy way.
in a healthy way. Yeah. What do you guys think? Feel free to jump in, you guys.
I definitely see two different ways that things go down negatively. Either somebody is completely reclusive and doesn't want to handle the problem, and they take it as like, this is done, this is over. And then the other side of like somebody being overly invested and believing or feeling that fighting is a symbol of somebody caring for them, or that they need to constantly be fighting or have some sort of drama. And it's kind of like the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And either way, when your relationship is just built on arguments, it really can't go right. But I do think that's something that I've learned along the way. And I'm like so single, just for the record, like aggressively single, and I love it. But I've heard this, it's like, it's not you and them against each other, it's you both against the problem. And that has usually been helpful in any place in my life, like friends, family, anywhere. But when you have a problem with somebody, it's also important to like weigh the pros and cons. Like to really analyze how the person reacted in that problem. Like if they like lashed out and were like, this is on you, let's evaluate. Like,
Right.
are they good for you?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's all about like knowing your boundaries and yeah.
I really like that you brought up just like how people act in a relationship, and this brought me back to a topic that I am pretty interested in, and it's the 4 types of attachment styles. Do you guys know, have you guys heard about that?
Yeah, psychology classes.
Love that.
I wrote a paper on it.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I'll ask you for it.
Oh, it
Like
was
the
a long time
definition.
ago. It was a
Oh,
long time
okay,
ago.
okay. So essentially, the 4 attachment styles are anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, and as well as secure attachment. And this is usually directed to how people act in a relationship. For example, anxious attachments, they will be very like, it's also right, insecure. It's also termed as preoccupied. They'll be very like active in the relationship. If the other person doesn't text back for like 10 minutes, they're going crazy. They think this person's mad at me, things like that. Avoidant, on the other hand, is completely the opposite, and it's also referred to as dismissive. And when they start kind of having feelings for someone, they tend to pull back and like recall their emotions and actions and things like that. And I'm actually not sure about disorganized. Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Disorganized is also referred to as fearful avoidant. So I'm pretty sure it's just that,
Maybe always paranoid.
yeah, their attachment
Like,
style is
yeah.
very, sporadic. Like one day they're, loving,
Secure,
love bombing you, and next they're out of the picture.
It's confusing for the partner.
Right,
Yeah.
very confusing for the partner. And the last one is secure, which is
What you want.
The goal.
which is the goal for yourself and your partner, and that's just being secure with
And
yourself
confident.
and confident in your relationship. Yeah, so I think even knowing your attachment style is really important. It stems from how your parents actually raised you and how you interacted with your parents, and that actually creates your attachment styles, which I find very interesting because
Can I add to that too?
Yeah, of
I have a
course,
lot to add to that. So, and to what you said, Clara. So, attachment styles, yes, they're developed partly from how you're raised, but also what has happened to you in your life. And so, if you've experienced trauma, you could be a little bit more of the anxious attachment style. If you've been hurt before, if you've suffered a loss at a young age, I mean, a number of different things impact our attachment styles. And to your point, I think, Clara, you made a really good point, and I heard facing the world, like it should be us against the world, or I think that was the way I interpreted it, but that's the way I see like a healthy relationship. It's like your partner, you're truly partners against the world, like you have committed and you're together facing all of the obstacles together. But in order to get to that place of having that healthy partnership and to be able to do that, each individual has to be healthy, and that's where I think what you're talking a lot about, and I think that's so important because remember, 18 to 25, you're still navigating everything. And some people don't have literally the capacity, either from trauma or from other things going on for them. They don't have that capacity to deal with their own emotions in order to have that argument, to have fair fighting, right? And to address the conflict, I think you mentioned too, or they're very conflict avoidant because they haven't been taught how. So there's so many different things that as an individual we have to learn before we can get to the point of truly having a really, really healthy relationship, because it starts with yourself, and then whoever you choose as your partner, they have to have gone through that themselves, or at least aware where they're struggling and joined together.
yeah, that's incredibly interesting and really important to learn about. Yeah, anybody else has a opinion or an idea?
I think it also goes, like you said, like past experiences go into that, but I also think it's like the whole like nature versus nurture type thing, where it's like your experiences also affect, but also just like the way that you are naturally, like how they say like some people are kind of like more reserved or more outgoing. It might have to do something with how you address a problem as well.
Yeah, thank you for that too. Yeah, because if you're like very sensitive or insecure, or that's just part of your personality, or very, like you said, outgoing, or if you're one who withdraws anyway, because when you get upset, you're more of an introvert, and you need to go and reflect within. That all impacts the way you interact in a relationship. Yeah.
Right, that's all really important to know. And yeah, so I think we really scoured a lot of the talks about how media can affect relationships negatively. And stemming off of that, I really just want to talk about the warning signs of a toxic relationship. And I'm going to list them out, so bear with me. There are 10, I believe, and I'm going to say their definitions too, so it's going to be a while. But the first one is intensity. So this is when someone expresses very extreme feelings and over-the-top behavior that feels overwhelming. This can also be referred to as love bombing, if that is an easier term that I feel like our generation kind of knows right now. The second one is manipulation, which is when someone tries to control your decisions, actions, or emotions. That could be with friends, or just, you're not allowed to hang out with certain people, or
What you wear.
Or yeah, even what you wear. The third one is sabotage, which is when someone purposely ruins your reputation, achievements, or success. Fourth one is guilting, when someone makes you feel responsible for their actions or make you feel like it's your job to keep them happy. The next one is deflecting responsibility, which is when someone repeatedly makes excuses for their unhealthy behavior. Next one is possessiveness, which is when someone is jealous to a point where they try to control who you spend time with and what you do. Next one is isolation, which is when someone keeps you away from friends, family, or other people. The next one is belittling, when someone does and say things to make you feel bad about yourself. Next one is volatility, which is when someone has a really strong, unpredictable reaction that makes you feel scared, confused, or intimidated. And the last one is betrayal, which is when someone is disloyal or acts in an intentionally dishonest way. Yes, so after saying all those definitions, does anyone just have something to add on to that list maybe, or just want a clarification, or
I
just
have a
want to add something?
question.
Yeah.
For it to be deemed a toxic relationship, does it have to be all 10 of them, or can it be 1, 2, 3? Like, what is it?
Great question. That is such a wonderful question. There's no right answer. There's really no one answer to that. So it's in like the whole of the relationship. If they're doing one of these things all the time and it's really demeaning to you, and that doesn't work for you, then it's toxic. So I think that's a really valid question.
Okay.
I'll pause because I have adding on, but I want to make sure that I answered your question.
No, yeah, you got it, yeah.
Okay. Can I add on to the intensity one? So I kind of describe it as being too much too quick, or like too good to be true really fast.
Right.
So like a big gift, and
Right.
and it's almost like kind of makes you feel uncomfortable to
Right,
get
love
something.
bombing.
Yeah, exactly. Like that, just too much too quick. Most of the other ones kind of happen over time, and that's where really in abusive relationships, or really really unhealthy relationships, it's almost like the person it's happening to, it just all of a sudden they realize they're trapped up in it, because things are pretty spread out, and it happens over time, but it also, the frequency of these things gets worse. So like your question, Donna, was so valid, because it may start with just one of them, and if that's enough and it feels toxic, then the person shouldn't stay, but oftentimes it gets worse and worse, and there's multiple of these that are happening.
Right. I think that's really important to express, that a lot of these things that happen in a relationship, it does not happen overnight, and a lot of times it happens one by one, and then that person could just be making excuses or things like that until it kind of completely blindsides them that all of these are just signs. And yeah, I also really like that you said even just one sign is enough to deem it as a toxic relationship, and that kind of is on the individual to define. And I find that really important, because some people, really stick to labels, and sometimes that's not as important as just seeing the signs and saying, I need to get out for me.
Yeah.
Which is really important.
Exactly what you just said, Caitlin, is for me, and that's enough. And
Right.
a lot of people, again, going back to like the comparisons and the social media and all of that, it makes it seem like it's not enough. Like something else has to happen for you to leave.
Right.
No, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you, and that is enough.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, do you guys have anything to add? No worries. But yeah, I think I just think love bombing is really hard to even define because again with media and personally I'm a really big avid romance reader, and a lot of times these characters they be love bombing real hard, and it's like a fictional person, so it's like, oh, you're my soulmate, and it's the first
It's
date.
like cute though, but
It's like cute in a fictional
Yeah.
manner, but in real life it's a little scary, which is why I think a lot of these signs can be kind of kind of skewed in like the media that we digest. I'm gonna need to think about a movie where I feel like they're love bombing. Oh, The Notebook. The Notebook. He totally love bombs her.
I've never seen it.
So
I read the book. It's been a long time, but
okay,
I did read
okay.
the book.
So essentially in The Notebook, I will not get into the gist of the story, but how they meet is that Noah, oh my god, I
Ryan
can't.
Gosling?
Yes, so
There you
Ryan
go.
Gosling. So Ryan Gosling's
Ken.
character. Wait, I low-key forgot her name.
Doesn't he go to military or something?
Yes, he does.
Ryan Gosling and Regina George.
Oh yeah.
Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams, they play the two main characters in the movie because I unfortunately have not read the book. But in the movie, basically, the first time Ryan Gosling meets Rachel McAdams' character, he falls in love with her at first sight.
Yeah.
Not realistic expectations, you guys. And so she's actually on a date with a different guy. And he pressures her to go on a date with him. Essentially, they are on a Ferris wheel, and he jumps on the Ferris wheel, and he tells her, I'm going to basically, fall off the Ferris wheel if you don't agree to go on a date with me.
That's manipulation.
That is manipulation and love bombing and
I'd be like,
horrible.
jump. I'm just kidding.
That is
Joking,
bad.
joking.
Now, as a teenager, I still am a teenager, but the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my god, you guys.
Like, that's so cute.
It's so
I want-
romantic.
I want
It's so romantic, but if that happens to me in real life, I might be crying and
Call the
sobbing.
cops, yeah.
I know, I'd be like, you,
I think it also goes with the fact that in movies they're like good looking, and like when a person's good looking, it seems like
a lot is
as
excused.
better. It's like pretty privileged, and then if it's like someone who's not as pretty or conventionally attractive, it's like creepy and like stalkerish, and I think that can also kind of confuse people when it's someone that is like just visually attractive and you don't really get the signs because you're just like, oh, I'm so lucky that this very good looking person is even looking at me.
Right, when, no matter the looks, it's creepy,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can also skew people into thinking that's what girls want or that's what
Yeah.
other people want. And no, that is not what anyone should want, actually. You should not want to be love bombed. But that is an example of love bombing and manipulation, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so in the movie, she rejects him after he gets on the ground again. And
Slay.
he kind of manipulates his way into hanging out with her through a double date.
Oh
And kind
my
of just keeps
God.
being like, I really like you. And she falls for it. But, I'm just kidding.
She's a victim.
Maybe a little. But yeah, that is an example of love bombing. Do you guys have any other like media piece where it's an example so we can kind of portray how it would look like in like a romance movie or something?
I don't have a media piece, if that's okay.
Of course.
But I did want to go a little bit deeper into this like pretty privilege idea.
Yeah.
And kind of on the flip side of it, I feel like when you're with somebody, this whole like, what's it called? Like, leagues. The whole league system. Like,
What is
she's
that?
out of your
Oh,
league.
okay.
You're this, you're
They
that.
call it punching now.
What?
oh,
Really?
he's punching, she's punching.
Oh, like
That's
punching up?
Weird.
So like the uglier person is punching.
I haven't
Or
heard that one.
something like that.
Wait, isn't there like a Friends reference or something?
Oh, the Duff?
No.
Oh.
Never mind.
The Duff, there's a movie, The Duff, yeah, like the ugly friend.
Dang. Well, keeping that in mind, I was just trying to kind of talk about how I feel like when you are a human being, we have all these expectations on ourselves as well. Like how you should look, how you should act in a relationship, like what you bring to the table, you know? And when you're with somebody that you may feel like is out of your league or society's telling you they're out of your league, it's like you're more inclined to give them the chances. Like, oh, he love bombed me, he manipulated me, I can't see my friends anymore. Like, it's okay because he's hot. Like, he's blessing me with his presence. Or, like, in any type of relationship. And it'll find, like, you or whoever it may be in a really awkward position because it kind of makes you reevaluate, like, your self-perception. And like putting up with more because of somebody that you perceive as like even above you. Or maybe it can be the opposite, like the person who thinks that they're with somebody that's below them is intentionally treating them poorly or manipulating them to make them do what they want. It's very nuanced, but when you said pretty privilege, I definitely was thinking about things like that.
I didn't think about that.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
What you're, sorry. I was just going to say what you're saying is like minimizing your own worth. Like if somebody's in a different league or punching up, is that what I'm saying? I don't even know the new word.
But it's
I
called
think I heard that.
punching. It's called punching.
Okay, so if somebody's punching,
Yeah.
am I saying that right? Because
yeah,
that's
you're
totally
saying
new
it,
one to me. But that would be like very much like if you feel that way, then minimizing your own worth just by making excuses for that person, which would keep you there, right?
Yeah.
Which would be obviously unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that really goes into, you know, the insecurities that we have about just being in a relationship. And yeah, I really find that a little annoying. So it was like, was it National Boyfriend Day, like last month?
Yeah.
And then I was just seeing a bunch of TikToks being like, oh, all the jump scares I get of seeing your guys' boyfriends. And I'm like, guys.
What does that mean? Like they're
Jump scare?
Like they're not aesthetically pleasing.
You know, like
but
the horror movie.
But they're with a girl who's
there's,
like very pretty, let's say.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that serious because it should really be about our personalities and how we treat each other in a relationship and not how you look because, you know, obviously they're in a relationship for a reason and I would hope it's not just for your looks because that's really sad. At the end of the day, that is really, really sad and no one should be getting into a relationship purely off of that. And it just really goes into insecurities about getting into a relationship or being in a relationship.
Yeah, they always say like attractiveness is what is it called, like makes people like want to talk to you, but then like personality is what makes them stay. I think that's
Always
really
find
important.
somebody who makes you laugh.
Yeah,
Because if you're going long term, you really want to be able to laugh at life.
Right. Does anybody just want to share an anecdote about like something they felt insecure about while they were in, you know, either a romantic relationship or even just a friendship or things like that?
Crickets.
I have to think. I asked that question, but I have to think about the answer.
Are you asking like what we've either experienced ourselves or felt insecure about in a relationship?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't mind sharing. Yeah, for the longest time, I always felt fat. I always felt, because I just thought I was fat, and so I would compare myself to other girls. And so if I was dating somebody or had a boyfriend, I would always make the assumption that I'm not good enough because I'm too fat. And there's so many other girls that are prettier and better shape than me. And so I had that narrative in my mind for the longest time until I finally was able to work through that. And so I think that's a really common one, unfortunately. And not just for women, for men too, with body image issues and things like that, and how much that can be very detrimental to our self-esteem in a relationship. So then we don't accept what we're worth, you know, and that kind of thing. So.
Right. I think that is a very common occurrence in probably most adolescents' relationships is just how body image and just insecurities really get in the way of relationships and them being healthy at all. And yeah, I would say I've experienced in that too, just being insecure about like body image and having those thoughts of like, oh yeah, but there are prettier girls, you know, that really sucks. But it's a very real emotion and very validating for anyone who feels it. But yeah, anyone else like to share?
Kind of random, but I used to have braces and I was insecure about my braces.
Yeah.
Even though I
Me
wanted
too.
them though, I wanted them. But then I was like, they're kind of ugly.
Or did you think like other people would think they're ugly, even if you kind of wanted them, you know?
Yeah, because they did look ugly.
I I think braces are kind of cute, guys.
They're cute when your teeth are kind of straight-ish, but when they're crooked, they're like,
It's fine.
nah.
That's
And then
real.
they put like gold. They put gold brackets instead of silver.
Really? I don't think I've ever seen that.
That's
actually
like
kinda
hard.
cool. I know,
Yeah.
like it's like grills.
It makes your
Yeah, but that's
teeth
what I
look
was thinking of
yellow.
Dawn throwing in her
That's
grills.
kind of cool.
It makes your teeth look yellow.
But you
It just seems
grills.
so painful. That's what I always think with braces, how painful.
Oh, I like the pain actually.
It didn't bother you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I liked it.
I'm just
That's a
kidding.
conversation piece for later.
I've heard that with retainers too, that some people actually like that.
Oh, I wear
Oh,
my
I
retainers.
don't.
Like
and
you
then-
don't
Yeah.
wear it for a couple days and you
No, I
put them
always wear
in
them.
and they
I'm
hurt.
traumatized. I took 5 years braces. I'm not
That's
gonna
a
get
long
them all
time.
crooked.
Dang.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something like quickly. So there's like I've definitely struggled with like body image and like face image.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
Cards.
Still
Just the
currently.
face card, like walking around civilization, you know, scrolling on social media, and you're like, if the guy I'm with or the girl I'm with would see them, they're gonna be like, why am I with this
With
rat?
Don't say
But
that.
like, no, it's like this negative, like delusional thinking at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's like, why do they choose me if they have all these better options? But something that I've recently struggled with because I've been so single is when I find someone, like, I have this fear that they're gonna figure something out that's gonna make them want to leave me. Like, and I have struggled with like maybe it's like a family thing or a health problem or just something that makes me me, and I'm like, I need to not tell them this information, and if they find out, like, they're gonna break up with me. And because of this fear, I've definitely found myself like catering my personality and my information sharing based on what I think that they would accept.
That's so common too.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I get it, you know? Like, growing up and having parents that weren't the most accepting at times of certain things, or maybe even me just not wanting to share because if I did, I didn't get the response that I wanted. Like, it just depends. But yeah, sometimes it feels like easier to not share.
Sometimes I feel the opposite. I feel like I have a conversation and then after I'm like, damn, I overshared too much.
Well, that too, exactly,
Like,
yeah.
why did I say that? Why did I talk about my mom? Like,
They're
what?
gonna treat me differently.
Yeah.
No, yeah, just the like overthinking when you're done with it, like a conversation, you're like, oh my god, was that annoying? And they probably don't care, you know. They're like, oh, that
But then
person
there's
was
like
nice.
that small voice. It's like they probably do care.
They care.
Yeah.
Everybody has that little voice in our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is.
It's hard.
It's annoying. Like, sometimes I'm like, my voice is the only correct thing. Like, my thoughts are the only correct thing. I don't care if somebody tells me, like, you're good. I'm like, they hate me. It's bad. Yeah. Maybe I'm toxic to myself.
I think we all kind of are sometimes.
Yeah.
Our brain isn't developed yet.
Yeah, I know. 5 more years.
Yeah.
And even then, I promise you, I work with a lot of people in their 40s and 50s who, you know, are still working on it. So,
Still working
yeah,
on it.
that's why we're talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Who, you have anything to share?
Maybe my personal experience. Personally, for me, like, I'm insecure about my personalities because I'm not outgoing. Sometimes I didn't want to share my problems because I don't want to make my partner like don't like not. I don't want to feel the pressure of my problems to him. So, but actually he wants to share the problem and like solve together. So the different personalities, like, it's become my insecurities, like.
Thank you for sharing. No, yeah, I think all of our insecurities are very valid, and I'm sure most students that are going to hear this podcast are like, oh, I felt that way too. And I just want them to know that it's going to be okay. You know, we're all going through it at the same time. You know, I'm going to plug the student wellness counselors. You know, if you want to talk about anything, we have this new program that, you know, Erin has created, and it's called the Student Wellness Counselors. And you can talk about anything you would like to your peers.
And Clara's one of them.
Yes.
Yes.
And we're starting soon. We will start
Started
once
today. Today.
Oh, right. We are. It has already started for a couple weeks once this
Oh,
this
yeah.
comes out.
Yeah.
Maybe you already went.
Yeah, it's
That would be
possible. I hope you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, to that point, actually, if I can just add, like, we were just talking about insecurities, and we all have them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is one of the things that humans really appreciate is validation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the peer wellness counselors are, is
Right.
they're there to validate experiences and to give you a space to feel like heard. Yeah, exactly.
Of course. That is wonderful. I'm going to ask a question to Erin, and we're gonna go a little bit, I guess, darker into, just do you have like any experience or stories of, how common domestic violence can be in teenage relationships? Because for me, from what I've seen on the media or anything like that, I feel like domestic violence and all of that is really targeted into the audience of like older couples and even married couples. I don't see a lot of coverage for teenage domestic violence, but I know it exists and I know it's important to cover. But I feel like just the news and anything like that, it doesn't really cover domestic violence until something incredibly horrible happens, like a murder or something
Physical,
like that,
yeah.
like physical. But domestic violence can be even mental, or a lot of times it is physical, but also a lot of times it is mental
And verbal, yeah.
and verbal as well. And yeah, do you just have anything to say about how domestic violence affects teenage relationships?
Yeah, so the term domestic violence refers to, if we're really getting legal here, it really refers to either people living together or formally living together or married. And so I think that's why domestic violence, the idea of it, isn't really related to dating. So there is dating violence, or like a larger term is interpersonal violence, because then that covers everything, right? Even sexual assault of a dating partners, right? But yes, there's different levels as well. There's emotional, there's sexual, there's physical, verbal, all of those different types of abuse that can happen within an unhealthy or toxic or domestic violence relationship, but it doesn't have to be all of them. And I think that's why maybe it's not talked about as much. But what we do see a lot of, and it's incredibly common, is a lot of the like threats or throwing things. Like somebody's not able to deal with their anger, so they're throwing things, which can be very scary to the person sitting there, because then they don't know if that's going to be directed to them. There's a lot of the social media, posting pictures, sending photos, sending, just a lot of that stuff that goes on. But it definitely happens in relationships of any age. And I've worked with, in cases when I worked for the court system, where I actually had a case where a young woman who was 17 was murdered by her boyfriend. And so it does happen, even to that degree of violence. And so it needs to be talked about, and they're doing a lot of community outreach programs in schools, even as early as middle school now. One Love Foundation, which I know is on some of our resources that we're sharing, they actually go into schools and do like peers, and they talk about these things. And that was all started by parents of a college student who was murdered in the University of Virginia several years ago. And so it's unfortunately it's very prevalent. It's just like you said, you only hear about the homicides, but all these other things that are happening to people is not talked about, but it's so common.
Right. And it's definitely like, just because only the worst cases are kind of covered, it kind of make a person feel a little bit alone in their experiences. But I think it's the opposite. I think a lot of people go through these situations, and it should be talked about more. And I just want to talk about how there was something you said about, I don't know if it was like who said it again, but just a lot of how we grew up affects our relationships. So I want to dive into how like trauma affects our relationships. And do you think there are any situations that do you think trauma makes like a person more susceptible to like being in an abusive or toxic relationship?
Not trauma specifically, no. But being raised in a household where that is happening, a person, so they used to do studies of girls, female identified persons, who grew up in homes where they saw that their mother was abused, that woman or girl was more likely to be in an abusive relationship, and that the boys were more likely to be perpetrators. But that really can go both ways, because you're talking about same-sex relationships, and so it really can go both ways. So those numbers are higher, but not just for trauma, because trauma can be a car accident, it can be, you know, from a home country where there's a lot of war and escaping war. I mean, there's so many different types of trauma, so not necessarily trauma in and of itself, but yes, the numbers can absolutely be higher for being raised in a home and then not having support or not receiving support from a therapist or from somebody else like a mentor to help you understand and see that and then change
Right.
what you've picked up as a child.
Right. Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying that, and I also think that's really important. I put down one program that I would like to talk about, which is SAVE, and it stands for Safe Alternatives to Violent Environments, and I just took this from their website. But essentially, SAVE provides a variety of services from victims of domestic violence, emergency shelters, crisis counseling support groups, community education, legal clinics, and a hotline. The shelter provides emergency housing for 30 individuals for up to 90 days. Shelter services include a children's program, workshops, counseling, support services, and confidential stay for victims of domestic violence. And Erin, you have worked with SAVE, I believe, and would you like to just share more information and things like that?
Yeah, so I could talk a lot about history of domestic violence and how these organizations even came about, and I won't say too much other than SAVE and other organizations similar. They really started in the 70s, and that's when, you know, the women's movement of the 60s and all of that started coming about. And before all of this, like, a woman really couldn't speak about her experiences at all. Even to this day, we're whoever speaks about domestic violence are usually it's their fault. Like, somehow it's easier to blame the victim than to hold the perpetrator accountable. So organizations like SAVE, and there are several in the Bay Area. SAVE usually serves the Tri-Cities area. I also worked at Tri-Valley Haven and Livermore, which serves the Tri-Valley area. There's one up in Oakland, there's San Leandro, they're all over the place, San Jose. But really, these organizations are there to provide all of these services, and their services have grown. It used to just be a shelter, which has been fantastic, and truly for people who had no other place to go and had to escape an abusive situation. But now they have legal clinics, which is the one that I worked in, and I worked in the COPS program. So also helping police officers and training them how to respond to domestic violence calls. So a lot of different services that these agencies offer, including the community outreach, and they go into schools, and they have the school program too. So they go into schools and talk about these types of things with middle and high schoolers too, which is great.
Yeah, I think this program is really wonderful. I would also like to just list out the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 800-799-7233, and it is a 24/7 national hotline. Languages are English, Spanish, and there are 200 plus through interpretation services, which is really wonderful. You know, it's a national hotline, and yeah, I would recommend it to use it if you find yourself in a situation where you deem it useful. But yeah, now that we have talked about a lot of, you know, the signs of a toxic relationship and things like that, I would like to ask one more question about that, which is, if a person finds himself in like a unhealthy relationship, do you have any advice on how to get out of that relationship in a safe way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it depends on what level we're talking about. If it's unhealthy and toxic, hopefully that person has friends that they can talk to. At your age, you have friends usually who you turn to. Maybe a counselor if they want to do that and talk it through with a counselor. If it's truly like physically abusive and you're physically at risk of safety, then going through organizations such as SAVE, or even a therapist who could do a safety plan, because there's a lot of different things that go into preparing to leave somebody if it's a violent relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that question because I think no one really talks about how to get out of a, you know, unhealthy or abusive relationship. You know, a lot of the media just say it's bad, you should leave, but leaving sometimes can be incredibly scary and hard for a lot of people.
Right. And on average, somebody leaves 7 times before they leave for good. That's what studies have shown. So it's not easy.
Yeah.
Especially the longer you're in the relationship, and then the more, like, if you're living together, if you have kids together, if now that they've isolated you from your friends and family, they've like maybe you had a job or you were in school and so many things that they took you away from because of this. They've really isolated you. It's that much harder to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that advice and that opinion. And again, now that we talked a lot about, toxic relationships, I really want to dive into signs of a healthy relationship, which I will do another definition, so bear with me again. But the first one is comfortable pace. The relationship moves at a speed that feels enjoyable for each person. Second one is trust, which is confidence that your partner won't do anything to hurt you or ruin the relationship. Third one is respect. You value one another's beliefs and opinions and love one another for who you are as a person. Next one is fun, which is you enjoy spending time together and bring out the best in each other. Next one is healthy conflict, openly and respectfully discussing issues and confronting disagreements non-judgmentally. Next one is honesty. You can be truthful and candid without fearing how the other person will respond. Next one is independence, which is you have space to be yourself outside of the relationship. Next one is equality, which is the relationship feels balanced and everyone puts the same effort into the success of the relationship. And the last, oh no, sorry, not the last one, second to last one is taking responsibility, which is owning your own actions and words. And the last one is kindness, which is you are caring and empathetic to one another and provide comfort and support. Yeah, would anyone like to jump in about any other tips that you have, or just want to talk about something deeper? How's soon for you?
I don't remember if you said this, but maybe having compassion and being patient, because everybody gets comfortable at their own pace. I mean, I guess that goes with comfortable pace, but and just also communication, because I think sometimes the other person might not really know what's going on, so having a healthy level of communication is important.
Taking your own accountability to communicate your needs.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that if you don't even know them or you don't feel secure enough to own them because you're worried the person may leave, how can you do that? Right? Yeah.
Yeah, do you guys have anything to say? Oh, let me show.
For me, I think healthy conflict is really important. That's I couldn't have because we just we don't want to show. We need to openly negotiate what things we like, dislike, so that it will be a healthy relationship. If not, one time takes longer, we don't share those things, and it will be a bigger issue to solve later. So healthy conflict is really important, to have a healthy relationship.
Right. And it's all about your boundaries. So as teenagers, I feel like a lot of us have a hard time even setting boundaries or really understanding what boundaries are even in a relationship, whether it's romantic or friendship wise, or with parents, anything like that. So Erin, do you have any tips on how to form a good boundary for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, boundaries are difficult, and I appreciate you saying for your group, age group, but it is for a lot of people. I mean, I think just even understanding. So boundaries are in all parts of our life, and somebody may be really good in setting boundaries, say in their relationships, but not at work or not with their time or not, with their friends. It just depends. But first of all, understanding that boundaries can either be rigid, so somebody who just is very, very rigid in their boundaries and they don't give, they're not flexible, or they can be healthy, or they can be sponge-like. So they just somebody who says yes all the time, who doesn't know how to say no. So that's imagine a sponge soaking up the water, it just gets heavier and heavier because you don't say no, right? And so really, again, the more you know yourself and the more self-awareness that you have, you're able to identify what you need. And what you need is okay, period. What you need is okay. This is for anybody. And so learning how to articulate that and set that boundary. But a lot of people say it's, they feel guilty if they do. And actually the thing I say is, especially in a relationship, in a really healthy relationship, you owe it to yourself and to your partner to set that boundary and speak up for what you need. Because I think you would want the same for that other person to do. You wouldn't want them saying yes to something they don't want to do. So yeah, it's hard though. Boundaries are hard.
Yeah, they are. Do you guys have anything to add?
I also think boundary setting is important, because if that boundary comes out later it might make your partner feel guilty for not knowing it or not respecting it, but in reality they didn't know. So it's just means communication.
That's why what you said earlier, that communication is so important.
Yeah. But that can be hard for some people too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also maybe important to say that, you know, your boundaries can change all the time. One day you can be like, oh, this boundary was okay, but the next day you say, oh, I have a boundary now. And that's completely normal to set that, and don't feel guilty, you know, that the other day you were okay with it and now you just changed your mind. I think that's also important to list out, that boundaries can change.
Can I add to that or clarify that actually? Because I can also see somebody who's manipulative saying, well, I have a right to change. And that can be very confusing and controlling for the other person. So yes, our boundaries, we have that right to change if our intention is good.
Yeah.
If our intention is truly, we're doing the best that we can, we respect our partner and all of those things. But if we're using that as an excuse to manipulate and make that push and pull in a relationship that's super confusing, that can be very controlling. So just want to clarify that.
Thank you for clarifying that. I did not even think about it that way.
That's okay.
But
I try and think of it in all ways. So.
Yeah, a lot of these things can be misconstrued into like an unhealthy tip, but yeah, these are just...
Well, your intention obviously wasn't bad, so right?
But yeah, thank you for clarifying. I think that's also really important, just to know that, I mean, just trust yourself when you get into a relationship. Come in with good intentions and patience for yourself, and every day you learn and grow. But yeah, does anybody else have any opinions to add on to the tips or even boundaries?
I just think heavy on the honesty. Like being honest with yourself and your partner, because I mean, obviously it's not good to lie to other people, but it's also not good to lie to yourself. If you don't like it, you don't like it, and if you do, you do.
Yes, that's wonderful. Erin, do you have any other advice that you would like to give to us or just the audience?
I think respecting yourself, and if you choose to be in a relationship, respecting your partner, you know, respect is a huge thing, but it really does start with yourself. And so I can't stress enough to identify what you want in a relationship, if you even choose to date or be in a relationship right now. But what you want is okay, and it doesn't have to be what everybody else wants. I think that's super important.
Right.
Don't settle.
Yeah, don't settle, you guys.
Yes.
Have your boundaries and expectations, and don't go for the bare minimum.
And you know, sometimes you may, you were going to say something too?
No, I'm just snapping. Like, yes.
And just
Don't
sometimes
settle.
realize too that sometimes we may really like somebody and they're not a bad person, but maybe they're not capable of giving you what you want or need at that time. And sometimes then it's like, okay, do I choose to stay in knowing that they're not capable? Or do I choose more and I choose me? And so sometimes you just kind of ride it out sometimes too until it's just time is up, you know, so it's hard.
Yeah. And I also saw this TikTok once where it was like, not all my sources being TikTok, but it was like this TikTok. I know. This TikTok, it was like advice to teenagers. Just because, you know, you and your crush like each other back, that doesn't mean you guys should get in a relationship. And I thought that was so, you know, interesting, because I feel like a lot of like younger relationships, oh, this person likes me back, I'm gonna just jump in. You
It's
know?
such a rare thing though.
I know.
Your crush liking you.
That's why they're crushes, right? It's
But yeah, I appreciate all the advice you gave, Erin, and I think on that note, we are about to end this episode. Again, I would like to reiterate the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233, and it is 24/7. And yeah, thank you for listening, everyone. Outtake with Harrison. Harrison, do you know your love language?
I don't.
He does not. Goodbye.